a WikiVidi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Spider-Man 2018 video game. Marvel's Spider-Man, commonly referred to as Spider-Man, is an action-adventure game developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Based on the Marvel Comics superhero Spider-Man. Released worldwide on September 7, 2018. It is the first licensed game developed by Insomniac. The game tells a new story about Spider-Man that is not tied to an existing comic book, video game, or film, and covers both the Peter Parker and Spider-Man aspects of the character. Spider-Man was well received upon release. Critics called it one of the best superhero games ever made, praising its gameplay, particularly the combat and web-swinging mechanics, graphics, narrative, characterization, and design of New York City, though felt it lacked innovation in its open-world design. The game became a commercial success, selling 3.3 million copies in its first 3 days of release, and broke several sales records. Gameplay. Spider-Man is an action-adventure game set in an open-world modern-day New York City and played from a third-person perspective. It features combat systems such as aerial combat, spider-sense reflexes, web shooting, and finishing moves. Spider-Man can push attacking enemies off of buildings, though Spider-Man does not let them fall, webbing them to the side of the building. The player is able to use Spider-Man's abilities such as web-slinging and wall-crawling, as well as other gameplay elements such as the ability to traverse using parkour, and the crafting and use of gadgets and alternative suits with special powers. Environmental combat, quick-time events and stealth are also featured in the game. Peter Parker, Miles Morales, and Mary Jane Watson are also playable in certain parts of the game. Peter's sections often involve solving puzzles, while Mary Jane's and Miles' segments involve using stealth to get to certain positions. Characters. Spider-Man features a large ensemble cast of characters from the history of Spider-Man comics. Peter Parker is a 23-year-old research assistant who gains superhuman abilities after being bitten by a genetically modified spider. Employing a secret identity, Parker uses these abilities to protect the citizens of New York City as the superhero Spider-Man. 8 years into his superhero career, Parker has become an experienced and masterful crime fighter, but struggles to balance his superhero and personal lives. He is aided in his fight by intrepid Daily Bugle reporter Mary Jane Watson, his ex-girlfriend, and NYPD Captain Yuri Watanabe. In his civilian life, Parker is supported by his Aunt May, who volunteers at the FEAST, homeless shelter run by philanthropist Martin Lee. Parker is employed by his friend and mentor, the respected scientist Dr. Otto Octavius. Spider-Man's adventure brings him into contact with other characters, including Miles Morales and his parents, NYPD officer Jefferson Davis and Rio Morales, New York Mayor Norman Osborn, and Silver Sable Inova, leader of the private military company Sable International. Spider-Man's mission to protect the city brings him into conflict with several supervillains. The story opens with Spider-Man taking down his longtime foe Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime in New York. Fisk is sent to prison, but warns that he was the only person maintaining order in the city. Fisk's absence gives rise to a supernaturally powered, demonic mask-wearing gang called the Demons, who begin carving up the city for the powerful Mr. Negative, who can corrupt people through his touch. Spider-Man must also confront Electro, Rhino, Scorpion, Vulture, Shocker, Taskmaster, Screwball, and Tombstone. Several other characters, including Parker's and Watson's childhood friend Harry Osborn, who has disappeared on a long European holiday, anti-Spider-Man podcast host J. Jonah Jameson, and Master Thief Black Cat have voice roles in the main game. The game features several references to the Marvel Comics universe, including the Avengers Tower, Wakandan Embassy, and the Sanctum Sanctorum. Spider-Man could create a Stan Lee cameos as a short-order cook. Plot. Parker is late for work helping Octavius demonstrate his advanced prosthetic limbs for his government financiers, who are left concerned by the demonstration's failure. Meanwhile, the Demons begin seizing Fisk's illicit resources and assets. Watson investigates an auction of Fisk's goods which is then attacked by demons. With Spider-Man, she learns that the demons are seeking something called Devil's Breath. Spider-Man is able to stop a demon attack with the aid of Officer Jefferson Davis. Davis is lauded for his heroism at a re-election event for Mayor Osborn attended by Parker, Watson, and Davis's wife and son, Rio and Miles Morales. Osborn receives a call threatening to punish the city for his sins, and flees the event. The demons then attack, killing Davis and many attendees. Parker witnesses their leader, Martin Lee, transforming into an inverted form dubbed Mr. Negative. But he is knocked unconscious before he can intervene. Following the attack, Osborn hires Silver Sable Nova and Sable International to supplant the police, and Parker befriends Morales over their loss and convinces him to volunteer at FEAST. Parker and Octavius continue their research, but Osborn withdraws government funding in an attempt to force Octavius to work for Oscorp. Spider-Man's search for Lee uncovers that Devil's Breath is a lethal and virulent bioweapon inadvertently created by Oscorp while developing a cure for genetic diseases at Osborn's behest. Lee locates and steals the only sample of Devil's Breath and threatens to release it unless Osborn surrenders to him. Lee is foiled by Watson and Spider-Man. Devil's Breath is secured, and Lee is incarcerated at the nearby maximum security prison, the Raft. Meanwhile, Octavius obsesses over creating enhanced limbs that exceed the limitations of the human body, creating 4 mechanical tentacles operated from his back and mentally controlled via neural interface. He reveals to Parker that he is suffering from a neuromuscular disease that will inevitably immobilize him, and that enhanced limbs will allow him to continue his work when his body fails. Parker warns Octavius that the interface could impact his mind and personality. Octavius continues its use in secret, overcome with anger at Osborn. The pair were once friends who founded the megacorporation Oscorp before Octavius left due to Osborn's unethical experiments. Spider-Man is drawn to the Raft by a prison break. He learns that some of his greatest enemies, Lee, Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion, have escaped. They subdue Spider-Man and present him to Octavius, now calling himself Dr. Octopus. Octavius warns the beaten Spider-Man to not interfere before taking the Devil's Breath and releasing it in Times Square, causing a mass outbreak. Aunt May is among those infected. New York descends into chaos while Octavius and his subordinates attack Osborn's properties. Osborn declares martial law and blames Spider-Man for the incident, branding him a fugitive. Spider-Man gradually takes back the city, defeating Electro, Vulture, Rhino, and Scorpion. Watson infiltrates Osborn's penthouse and learns that Devil's Breath was developed to cure Osborn's terminally ill son Harry. As a child, Lee was a test subject for the cure, gaining his abilities in an explosion of energy that also killed his parents and caused both his hatred for Osborn and the split between Osborn and Octavius. She also learns that an antidote exists and Lee has taken it. Spider-Man defeats Lee and recovers the antidote, but Octavius arrives, brutalizes Spider-Man, and escapes with both it and Osborn. While Spider-Man recovers, Morales is bitten by an Oscorp genetically modified spider that escaped on Watson. Wounded, Parker builds himself an armored suit and confronts Octavius atop Oscorp, liberating Osborn. Octavius reveals that he has known Parker's secret identity, and the two battle. Spider-Man recovers the antidote and defeats Octavius. His artificial limbs are removed and he is sent to the Raft. Parker is faced with using the limited antidote to save a near-death May or allowing doctors to use it as a chemical base to develop enough cure for everyone. He chooses to save everyone. Before dying, May reveals that she knows he is Spider-Man and that she is proud of him. 3 months later, New York has returned to normal and Parker and Watson rekindle their relationship. Morales reveals to Parker that he has gained spider-like powers, prompting Parker to reveal his own. Osborn enters a secret laboratory where Harry is kept in stasis with a black web-like substance. As Osborn places his hand on the tank, the substance reacts and copies him. Development. Marvel Entertainment approached Sony Interactive Entertainment wanting them to publish a Marvel game and to treat the game like a first-party seed title. Sony discussed with Insomniac Games which Marvel property they wished to adapt, and both agreed on Spider-Man. The game was the first licensed game developed by Insomniac Games after 22 years of developing original properties, such as Spyro, Ratchet and Clank, and Resistance. Brian Intihar, the producer of Sunset Overdrive and former community manager of Insomniac Games, served as the lead creative director, with Ryan Smith serving as game director. The game uses a modified version of the game engine first used in Sunset Overdrive. The game features the largest production team for an Insomniac game. The game was announced during Sony's E3 2016 press conference on June 13. It was the first in a series of games made by Insomniac and Sony, and marked the start of Marvel Games' new strategy to work with the best game companies, who are passionate about their characters. In April 2017, Ryan Penagos, vice president and executive editor of Marvel Digital Media, stated that the game would be released in 2017. At Sony's E3 2017 conference, the first gameplay demo was shown and it was announced that the game would be released in 2018. The game went gold on July 30, 2018, and was released on September 7, 2018. In addition to the special edition, a limited edition PlayStation 4 Pro bundle with the game was released on the same day. Yuri Lowenthal is the voice and physical actor for Spider-Man in the game. In early 2015, Lowenthal gained the role after some initial pushback within Insomniac due to him voicing one of the main playable characters for Insomniac's most recently released game at the time, Sunset Overdrive. But ultimately the game's lead writer John Pikett convinced the studio to cast him in the role due to his trust in Lowenthal's acting ability. Lowenthal worked with two stunt people throughout the game's development. He tried to differentiate between his voices for Peter Parker and Spider-Man, but thought that they could not be totally different and as a result spent a large amount of time finessing and massaging his performance to achieve a balance. John Pikett, Christos Gage, Ben Hoffman, and Dan Slott wrote the game's script, while John Pisano composed its original score. Reception. Spider-Man received generally favorable reviews according to review aggregator Metacritic. The game received praise for its gameplay, graphics, narrative, and characterization, while being criticized for familiar open-world tropes and lack of innovation. Critics called Spider-Man one of the greatest superhero games ever made. Mike Minotti of VentureBeat called it the best Spider-Man game and one of the best superhero games ever, while Game Informer's Andrew Reiner wrote, like Batman, Arkham Asylum before it, Spider-Man raises the bar for one of the world's most beloved heroes. The gameplay mechanics were praised by reviewers, with the web-swinging traversal in particular receiving unanimous acclaim. Josh Harmon of Eggman called the web-swinging an absolute blast, describing it as a more streamlined version of the physics-based system used in Spider-Man 2, while Game Revolution's Jason Folker praised it as fantastic. And I'm not sure if any game has quite captured the feeling of speed and movement quite like this one before. It's just so consistently good. GameSpot's Edmund Tran wrote it was endless fulfilling, and Spider-Man's greatest joy. Reiner found web swinging was so fun that he never once used the game's fast travel system. The game's combat was praised for its speed and fluidity while presenting a range of gadgetry and environmental options to execute satisfying attacks. Reiner called it excellently designed, highlighting its efficient use of the environment, while Folker applauded it as some of the best combat I've ever experienced. Dawn Bush found that the combat became an improvisational delight after gaining access to more abilities. Harmon wrote it offered heaps of versatility and expressiveness, if not quite depth, and found his only gripe was using the in-game gadget select menu that he felt disrupted the flow. He and Tran compared the movement system with the Batman Arkham series, with the latter writing that the inspired combat suitably characterizes Spidey's acrobatic nature. However, Mike Williams of US Gamer felt the Arkham comparisons were unfair, writing that the extent and capabilities of the gadgets on offer made it unique to the Arkham series as well as older Spider-Man games. He disliked only the auto-lock system for making it difficult in larger enemy groups to hit the intended target. Dawn Bush wrote that Spider-Man's stealth scenarios perfectly highlighted Spider-Man's talents, especially his love for designing gadgets, saying, "There's a methodical thrill to plotting out the order I wanted to web up enemies." Harmon said that while the stealth options were a bit shallow, they were never unpleasant and rarely mandatory. The game's visuals were also well received. Dornbush highlighted how gorgeous the skyscrapers of the city looked, and that, swinging around at dusk as the calm oranges of the setting sun hit the reflective glass, evoked some of the most calming, zen-like gameplay sessions I've experienced in a while. He found that while the faces of the main characters were spectacularly animated, those of minor characters were flat and often out of sync with dialogue. Leon Hurley of Games Radar called it a lovely-looking game. "It's rare to see something this big and detailed consistently look so good, with the very final story moments in particular. Some of the most spectacular-looking stuff I've seen in a while." The story received positive reviews, and was seen as one of the game's highlights. Williams thought it was the best aspect of Spider-Man and generally praised the handling of the cast, finding that near the end, "I was in love with these characters all over again." Hurley called the writing, performance and facial capture all top-notch stuff, with characters being voiced and performed with a depth and charisma I wasn't expecting. Faulkner described the story as an entertaining romp, and while he noted it presented a lot of familiar tropes, found there were enough new ideas to keep things interesting. Dornbush wrote that, despite having a moderately slow start, the story consistently delivers that sense of weight and impact. He praised the focus on Peter Parker and highlighted voice actor Yuri Lowenthal of having an emotional honesty in this version of Spider-Man that made it one of his favorite portrayals of the character. Similarly, Harmon praised the game's characterization and understanding of Parker, which he found was better than almost any comic adaptation, and commended the supporting cast as having crystal clear motivations and acting as a foil or mirror for Parker's altruistic approach to heroism. Some critics appreciated Insomniac's decision not to portray an origin story in the game. Harmon was disappointed that the side missions did not live up to the depth, complexity, or fun of the main story quests, with Videogamer.com's Colin Mahern writing that many of the side missions felt unnecessary in the overarching plot. Reception towards other aspects of the game were generally positive. Dornbush wrote that the boss fights were big and exciting, full of tense action. However, he criticized a few for feeling simple and rote, and found that, because of their focus during the beginning and ending of the story, there were large portions in the middle where they were noticeably absent. Carter called the upgrade system elaborately done, while Reiner wrote, "Gaining new toys is an incredibly satisfying element of this experience that Insomniac masterfully dangles like a carrot in front of the player." Tran praised the ability to use different suit powers independently from their original outfit as a godsend. The stealth sections that included the ability to play as Mary Jane Watson and Miles Morales were described by Reiner to bring variety in fun ways, including solid stealth mechanics and clever puzzles. Tran said that while he felt the mechanics weren't particularly demanding, he thought the segments featured some memorably tense scenarios. Conversely, Ahern described them as a bit hit and miss, and a bit grating at times. The game world received criticism. Complaints focused on Spider-Man's inability to successfully innovate as an open-world game, instead relying on familiar and repetitive tropes found in other free-roaming titles. Faulkner disliked how a lot of the side activities became tedious after a short time, and criticized the lack of variety in the collectibles quests. Harmon noted that he was more tolerant than most for collectibles and side content, but thought there was still too much of it for him in Spider-Man. Ahern disliked that the game incorporated open-world distractions that other titles had moved on from. Some were disappointed with the game's inclusion of towers that revealed portions of the map and identified waypoints, which had become standard with a number of past open-world games. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?